Hello guys, this is your friend Saiyan Paradox Audio Fanfic and we are back in new fanfic. What if Dragon Ball revealed Mr. Popo's lost daughter Part 1? Mr. Popo didn't feel like himself today. If anyone really knew him, and nobody who had been alive for the last 100 millennia really did, they would realize what day it was. Any other year, he would spend the day in isolation, but this year he had the opportunity to try something different. He stood there and watched his victims, or students, as Cammy insisted. They were flying through an obstacle course of rings that breathed fire. Normally he would love to watch their floundering attempts at training, but now he couldn't even be distracted from what day it was. He had denied them breakfast this morning, due to lack of hustle, he had said, in an attempt to make himself feel better, but it didn't work. Even the sight of Yamcha catching on fire wasn't enough to lift his spirits, and that boy's pain always brought a smile to his face. My God! Krillin cried out as he slammed into the lookout surface right in front of Popo, his back heavily scorched. Popo briefly considered kicking him off the edge of the tower again just for a laugh, but sighed instead. No, not today. Alright, maggots. Everybody stop. All of his students stopped what they were doing and looked at him. The rings ceased belching fire. The only sound was the howl of the high-altitude wind. Yes, Mr. Popo sir. Krillin said fearfully. Again, Popo felt the urge to hit him in an attempt to alleviate his mood, but he decided against it. There was no point. It wouldn't feel the same. That's all for today, he said with a sigh as he turned away and walked back toward the house. You've got the rest of the day off. Watch, punch each other, go for a walk. I don't care what you do as long as you do it far away from me. He didn't stick around to see their reactions or hear their questions. Walking through the halls of Cammy's lookout, he felt an even heavier weight pull at the void where his heart had been. Cammy had stayed in his room for the day, so the hallways were empty. That just seemed so appropriate to Popo. Once again, it was just him, alone with his thoughts. She would have loved it here, he said to himself as he entered his rooms in the West Wing. He had a small kitchen off to one side of his room, right next to the rack of weapons and torture tools. Moving as if in a daze, he pulled the ingredients he needed from the cabinets and set about baking. Within an hour and a half, he had a fresh chocolate cake in front of him, to which he began to apply a generous amount of vanilla icing. To make it perfect, he put strawberries all around the top of the cake. Reaching into the fridge, he pulled out a bottle of green soda, which he put in a tall glass along with some pink ice cubes. Right next to where the soda had been was a bottle of LSD he had been saving for a special occasion. He started to reach out for before his hand fell back against his side. No, not today. Setting up a platter with the cake in the middle and the glass of soda off to the side, he then took a step back. He focused his energy, creating a black portal in front of him, and reached into the box. Ignoring any screams of torment from inside, he rooted around in there for a moment, grabbing at various objects before he found what he was looking for. He pulled out a carefully wrapped parcel and added it to the platter. He took the platter in hand and walked to the back of his chambers, where a dark red curtain obscured a corner. By his will, the curtain moved aside. A prayer mat that he had stolen from some poor fool almost 2,000 years ago was spread on the floor in front of a framed picture. The picture depicted two individuals, one incredibly short while the other was a fair bit taller. They both had gray skin, with the taller one being a few shades lighter and possessing a distinctly feminine shape, and both were dressed in the most blindingly neon outfits one was ever likely to see. They both had huge smiles on their faces as they held each other close, laughing at a joke that had long since been lost to time. He sighed again before placing the platter down in front of the picture and kneeling on the mat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single pink candle which he put right in the center of the cake. A single thought caused the candle to light. He took one last look at the picture before closing his eyes. He hesitated as his throat clenched up, but he swallowed and pushed forward. Happy birthday to you, he began to sing in a trembling voice, happy birthday to you. Tears dripped down his face from his closed eyes before falling the ground. They sizzled as they burned dotted scars into the stone, and there was evidence of even older acid burns. Happy birthday, dear Puddin', he sang around the lump in his throat. Happy birthday, to you. For hours after that, Mr. Popo simply knelt on that mat and cried. He didn't even notice when the candle burned itself down to the wick. There were no sounds except for the occasional sob from the demon god. On this day of all days, all of the power he had gained and atrocities he liked to commit felt like they meant absolutely nothing. On this day of all days, he would give it all up to be with his daughter one more time. Mr. Popo had not always been the black-skinned lump of pure terror and appeal he was now. Once upon a time, he had been a mere demon. He was there when the universe began, and he knew he would be there when it finally ended, if he didn't decide to bring that about himself. That is, if fate hadn't intervened. The great hall was filled with chattering nobles and frantic servants. The band was playing their hearts out, but no one paid attention to them. The nobles boasted back and forth in between making shouted demands at the servants. Overseeing all of this, the master of the castle smiled and swirled his wine. The sound of a door slamming open caught his attention and he turned. A man in a warrior's uniform scuttled up to the head of the table and leaned to speak into his master's ear. Sire, I believe you should move to the escape tunnels as soon as possible, he said urgently. His master scoffed and waved away his concerns. You and your guards have a duty to fight in my name. You can handle anything the world can throw at you. Besides, if word spread that I fled my own castle like yelping dog, my position would be ruined. Now you get out there, get your men, and... Sire, you have no idea what's going to happen. The warrior seemed quite frantic now. You've gained the attention of him. Of Dumplin'. The goblet fell through the lord's numb fingers, shattering against the stone floor. The room became deathly silent. Nobody else seemed to even breathe. What did you say? He asked. Did you say Dumplin'? Where is he? He's coming soon, sire. Suddenly, the entire room shook from a heavy impact. Streams of dust fell from the ceiling as everyone's hearts seemed to skip a beat. See correction, the warrior whimpered. He's here. There was a drawn-out moment of silence before the doors were suddenly blasted into pieces. The guests in the dining hall screamed, some in fear while others in pain as they were skewered by shards of wood. Out of the huge cloud of dust and debris, those who dared to look at the entrance beheld the strangest creature they had ever seen. He was a very short and rotund individual. His skin had a goopy quality to it and was dark gray in color. A single tendril extended from his head and hung down in front of his face, looking like a pompadour. His attire almost seared the eyes, with bright pinks, yellows, and greens all fighting for dominance. His mouth was drawn in a malicious smile and his beady eyes seemed like windows to the void itself. Ding dong, he said. Dumplin' here. Looking at the master of the house, his smile grew even wider. Glad I finally caught up to you, Raspberry. Millennia in the future. Darkness fell across Tokitoki City before a sudden flash ushered a massive serpentine dragon into existence. He floated over the city, giving an ethereal glow over those below him. I am the eternal dragon, he said in a loud, rumbling voice. State your wish, and I shall. He suddenly stopped and took note of who had summoned him. No way. I thought I was done with all of you idiots. Trunks took a step back in surprise. In his experiences, dragons weren't supposed to act like this. However, he really needed help, so he swallowed his apprehension and pushed forward. Mighty Shenron, he called up the dragon. The Time Patrol is in desperate need of warriors to combat a great threat. My wish is for you to give me a strong ally. Someone with the kind of power to help me protect time itself. There was a moment of silence before the dragon responded. Really? He asked. You've got me, an all-powerful dragon, right here. You can wish for the threat you're facing to never exist. You could wish to make yourself all-powerful. Can't give you immortality anymore. That's not an option, but I have tons of other things I could do for you instead of just dragging someone here to fight for you with neither their knowledge nor consent. I mean, really, that's kind of a move, man. The fate of all existence is at stake, shouted Trunks. We need as many fighters as we can get. The dragon sighed and ground his fangs before an evil thought occurred to him. You know what? Fine, he hissed. You want a powerful warrior. I'll bring you the most powerful warrior that ever existed. Trunks sighed in relief. Thank you, Shenron, he said. The dragon just gave a dark chuckle. You say that now, anyway, your wish is granted. So tell me, Raspberry, Dumplin said in a conversational tone of voice, if you could sum up how you feel in one word, what would it be? Raspberry merely whimpered in pain. That was all he really could do now that every single bone in his body was broken in at least one place. That's what I thought, Dumplin said. All right, I've had my fun, so I think I can go ahead and kill you now. He raised his gloved hand, making a small ball of energy appear in his grasp. Before he could wipe Raspberry from existence, he felt a pull on his being. Someone summons you from a land far away, a strange voice said. Also, just so you know, this wasn't my idea. There's no reason to be mad at me in a few millennia. Wait, what? Dumplin managed to say before he suddenly vanished. He reappeared in the middle of some sort of pavilion. A circular moat wound around a central gazebo where 7 glowing balls with stars in them were arranged on some sort of pedestal. Trees lined the edges and there was also a paved walking path. Oh, and there was a huge green dragon looking right down at him. Mother what is that? Dumplin shouted in surprise. Like I said, grumbled the dragon, not my idea. Please remember that, Master. Suddenly, the dragon vanished with a huge burst of light. The 7 glowing balls rose into the air before flying off in different directions. Dumplin just stared at the strange sky as light returned to the world. Master. What could he? What? Someone else said. Dumplin turned to face the new voice. There was a young man with lavender hair, a long coat, and a sword standing a few yards away from him. He was looking at Dumplin with an expression of complete and utter shock. Who? What? How? The young man sputtered. What are you? Dumplin narrowed his eyes. The name's Dumplin, maggot. Now why am I here? My God, this can't be happening, the man muttered to himself before taking a calming breath. My name is Trunks and I'm a member of the Time Patrol. We protect the time stream from any outside interference. We have a crisis on our hands, so I wished for Shenron to summon a warrior capable of helping us in our time of need. So, I guess that's you. In a smooth motion, he drew his sword and leveled it at Dumplin's head. Oh, that is just precious, Dumplin said with a smirk. Trunks looked a little annoyed. I have to test your power to see if you're the warrior we require. He assumed a ready stance before lunging forward. Yah, he shouted as he brought his sword down on Dumplin, only for the blade to be suddenly stopped by Dumplin's open palm. The gray being just smiled at him. Huh, said Trunks. So this is what that feels like. Dumplin slammed his other palm into Trunks' chest, sending him flying back into the trees. And then through the trees. And a wall. And a building. And another building. Dumplin's smile grew even bigger. Yeah, he shouted. Get dumped. That was Dumplin's introduction to being a time patroller. Realizing it might be fun to learn more about history's most powerful fighters and eventually steal their powers, he decided to stick around for a while, even if that meant putting up with Trunks. He also found out how pitifully weak the various threats facing the Time Patrol actually were, and he took to suppressing his power enough that he could at least get an exciting fight out of it. This always confused Trunks and the other members of the Time Patrol when he would take down some powerful foe, since according to both senses and scouters, Dumplin had no energy reading at all. They didn't know that he fueled his strength with mana, an archaic power from before the birth of the Kais, instead of traditional ki. Dumplin fell into a routine with his new life as a time patroller. Fortunately, just when things were beginning to get a little stale, everything changed. That was when he met her tits. That was Dumplin's first thought when he laid his eyes on Tawa. The pale blue-skinned elf woman was dressed in a tantalizingly tight red bodysuit with black accents, with a section cut out to give a teasing glance at the undersides of her ample S. Dumplin stared at her, absolutely stunned by her beauty and pure innocence. It was a little shameful that he was so distracted that Mira got a free hit in, sucker punching him hard in the face and sending him flying across the little Namekian island their confrontation was taking place on. When he finally got his head to stop spinning, he pulled himself out of the crater he had made. Tawa was chuckling at his misfortune while Mira just glared at him. That was a cheap shot, Dumplin said, rubbing his cheek. You left yourself open, responded Mira. You deserved it, fool. Come over here and say that again, roared Dumplin, flying straight at Mira. They exchanged blows and energy blasts aplenty before Tawa stopped them, citing that Mira shouldn't waste time with such a weak opponent. Dumplin felt a little pissed, but he couldn't stay mad at a face like that. I hope you don't plan on getting in our way again, little man, said Tawa. Things would be very uncomfortable for you if you did. Actually, Dumplin said, my plans were more along the lines of you and me sharing a candle at dinner. Maybe some dancing. He shrugged. I mean, if you'd be up for it. Tawa stared at him for a few long moments. She blinked. She blinked again. Suddenly, she doubled over with helpless laughter. She leaned heavily on her staff, looking like she could fall right over at any second. Mira stared at her like he had never seen her do anything like this before. Eventually, Tawa managed to get herself back under control, wiping the tears from her eyes. Ha, ha, I think I like you, little man. What's your name? The name's Dumplin, he said, giving her a thumbs up. She laughed again. Well, Dumplin, I find you interesting. Keep this up and you might just make my favorites list. She placed her hand on Mira's arm before she winked at the short-time patroller. See you around, she said before she and Mira suddenly vanished. Dumplin just stared at the place where that beautiful creature had been standing. Dumplin, asked Trunks through Dumplin's scouter. Dumplin, can you hear me? What happened? Trunks, I think I'm in love. What? Thus began Dumplin's unconventional courtship of Tawa. He never gave up whenever he saw her. A compliment there, a flirt here, and he always managed to make her smile. Eventually, it wasn't even that look of smug superiority, but a genuine smile. She would leave him with some parting words and a wink, forever spurring Dumplin forward in his attempts to woo her. Of course, things got a little rocky when Dumplin blasted Mira into atoms, but Dumplin was sure he could work past that. His plans had to be pushed to the side, however, when some idiot named Demigra started ruining everything. The jerk even had the nerve to call himself a demon god. After Dumplin interrupted his plans left and right, they finally came to their final showdown. The red-haired little shit managed to break free from the crack of time, since Cronoa, the supreme Kai of time, couldn't be bothered to just kill him in the first place and be completely certain he would never come back, and Dumplin had to jump right into the crack to stop him. It was a pitched battle that came to an inevitable conclusion, with Dumplin defeating Demigra once and for all by absorbing him and taking every last drop of demon power for himself. After assuring Cronoa and Trunks that he had no intention to destroy the universe, not yet at least, he told himself, and soundly kicking Goku's ass in a sparring match, Dumplin went about his regular duties as a time patroller. He actually found himself enjoying the work again. He could meet some of the most powerful maggots the universe could make, he could learn their moves, and he could plan for dozens of ways to eliminate them and take their powers for himself. One issue, though, kept him occupied. When he finally managed to track her down, it was one of the most satisfying days of his life. Tawa stood on the edge of a cliff, staring down at a raging battle between primitive aliens. Such pathetic mortals. If what she understood was correct, these two forces were fighting over something as pathetic as a single island. That was it. Tawa rolled her eyes as one side suddenly attacked with automatic projectile weapons. This species was still in its Bronze Age, but apparently someone was doing some time travel to change a single battle. Just like that, this battle had become completely one-sided and utterly boring. Such pathetic creatures, she said with a shake of her head. Don't you agree? The Majin standing behind her shrugged as he waddled forward to be next to her. I don't know. All mortal races look pretty pathetic to me, he said. The only reason I stick around is because I'll get some good fights in. They stood there in silence for a few long moments, just watching the battle as it continued. Eventually, Tawa sighed. What happens now? She asked the goop-like warrior who had become her nemesis and stalwart admirer. He shrugged. My job is to break up this fight and make sure that the historical winners make it through. I was intending to do that. What about me? I never saw you. You can be gone by the time I come back. He took to the air and began to fly away. Tawa nodded in understanding and turned to go. But, he said, stopping her in her tracks. Tawa turned back and looked at Dumplin, who was rubbing the back of his head bashfully. If you want to hang out until I finish, we could. He stopped and took a breath. I was thinking that we could go out to dinner because you seem really lonely and I still like you a lot even though you tried to blow up time, but I'm okay with that since I feel the need to blow things up too, and I know this really great restaurant in age 748 that I really like that serves oysters by the bucketful, and I thought you might be in the mood for some seafood, so I thought if you wanted to. Alright. Dumplin's high-speed rambling fell silent as he looked at her in surprise. Tawa just gave him a small, genuine smile. I'd be happy to go to dinner with you after your mission. I'll wait here until you're done. Just make sure you don't take too long. She crossed her arms, simultaneously lifting up her S. Steam started trickling out of Dumplin's body holes. It would be rude if you kept me waiting too long. Dumplin blinked for a few moments before swallowing. I'll be right back, he said. With that, he spun around in the air and flew off toward the battle. Tawa did not miss the triumphant whoop he gave when he had made some distance. After many dates with Dumplin and a very persuasive plea, Tawa finally agreed to return to Toki Toki City with Dumplin, accepting his offer of a stable home and source of company. While the Time Patrol was initially against this arrangement, Tawa's arrival was particularly tense and hostile. They grudgingly accepted her presence. Tawa, in turn, gave them very little reason to be mad at her. When she wasn't with Dumplin, she kept to herself, frequently locking herself in her lab. While Cronoa was not comfortable with this, she eventually backed off when Tawa's creations started saving Time Patrollers from horrible situations. Cronoa even officiated their wedding, which was attended by a hopeless, confused crowd. Things were quiet and peaceful for a time, but then Tawa performed an experiment one night and everything changed. Who writes this crap? Dumplin muttered incredulously, staring down at the book in his lap. He was sitting in his favorite armchair in their cottage, resting after a hard mission through time. Tawa smiled as she stealthily made her way up behind him. Is that even physically possible? He asked himself. Tawa looked down at the passage he was reading and her smile widened. She wrapped her arms around him and kissed his cheek. I'm not sure, sweet one, she purred, but I'd be willing to find out. Dumplin chuckled and leaned into her embrace. How was your day, babe? He asked. Quite productive, she answered. I was actually about to run a new experiment. Can you lend me a hand? Of course, Dumplin said with enthusiasm as he set the book aside. Tawa smiled. Thank you, dear, she said, taking hold of his left hand. With a blur of motion, she took out the cleaver she had been hiding behind her back, raised it high, and removed Dumplin's hand and forearm with a single chop. Dumplin stared at the stump where his limb had been not a second earlier in confusion before he started screaming. Kai, Cammy and me, that ing hurt. Dumplin snarled in pain. The did you do that for? I said I needed your hand, she said dismissively as she returned the cleaver to the kitchen. When she came back out, Dumplin was still glaring at her. She rolled her eyes. Oh, don't be a baby. You can regrow your arm with no problem. It still hurts, he grumbled as his limb started to reform. She shook her head in exasperation. Anyway, follow me. You should at least see what I'm working on. She descended down into the basement, with Dumplin's waddling steps behind her. The basement contained her research lab, where she carried out her experiments and made her plethora of inventions. Currently, all of the furniture had been pushed against the wall to make room for the blood-red rune circle in the middle of the room. Thousands of characters were arranged in an amalgamation of hundreds of different designs she had researched. After weeks of work, this might be just what she was looking for. Well, said Dumplin as he saw the circle, that certainly looks delightful. He shot her a questioning look. You summoning your old sorority here for dinner? I definitely wouldn't say no to a party of demon coeds, if you know what I mean. Tawa merely smiled and rolled her eyes again, accustomed to her husband's sense of humor. No, dear, she said. I'm trying to make a homunculus. A homo what now? Dumplin asked, tilting his head in confusion. A homunculus, she enunciated. It's a synthetic being created by magic. Using our essences, I will bind it to our will and create a link that we can use to send mental commands in the heat of battle, and since it is bound to both of us, we are the only ones who could. Tawa trailed off as she saw her husband's glassy-eyed look of incomprehension. She sighed. Think of it as a remote-controlled car that can punch people and we have the controller. Sweet. Dumplin said with a smile. How's it gonna work? Watch and learn, dear, she said as she placed her husband's severed hand in the center of the circle. Pulling out a small knife, she cut across her palm and let her blood drip in the center as well. With that task done, she walked back to stand by Dumplin and extended her hands toward the circle. Let us begin, she said. The room seemed to darken as red electricity crackled over the circle. The runes began to shine with a blood-red light. The severed hand and Tawa's spilled blood lifted into the air and began spinning. More lightning crackled from the circle, but Tawa began exerting her control over it, keeping it contained within the boundaries of the circle. Time began to pass and the energy continued to build. To Tawa's surprise, the magic was starting to push against her control. She said absently, reasserting her will over the circle. Dumplin looked up at her. Was that a good, or a bad, he asked. Not sure, she answered honestly. The reaction is taking longer than I anticipated, as well as giving off a stronger push. It's like it's fighting against me or something. The demonic energy in circle was growing larger by the second, and was starting to jump and spark at an alarming rate. At first Tawa had felt like she was holding a sheet of fabric in place, but now it felt like she was trying to keep a raging bull in a headlock. Sweat began to drip down her brow as she struggled to hold on. With a loud crack, a bolt of red lightning broke free from her hold and connected with a spiked mace she had been trying to enchant. With a quick flash, the weapon was gone. Tawa grit her teeth and tightened her hold, but it was already trying to wiggle free. Is something wrong? Dumplin asked. She shot him an annoyed glance from the corner of her eye. Yes, dear, it's quite obvious something is going wrong, she drawled sarcastically. It's leaping out and trying to absorb matter. Tawa ducked as another bolt shot out from the maelstrom of energy, causing a rack of test tubes to blink out of existence. Blood and damnation. There go my new aphrodisiacs. You're what? Dumplin asked, suddenly interested. Tawa ground her teeth. Never mind. This thing is going to keep absorbing matter if we don't feed it something. If you can find some organic matter, I can maybe get the vortex to stop before it sucks up the whole city. What kind of organic matter? Anything, you fool, she screamed. Just hurry up. This thing won't wait for you. Aye aye, Dumplin said with a salute before flying up the stairs. Tawa just scrunched her face and tried to focus on her breathing. Seconds dragged on as this vortex of demonic power fought against her hold. Her body started trembling from the strain. Anyone else would have passed out by now. I got it, shouted Dumplin as he sped into the laboratory. Tawa let out a rattling sigh of relief. Throw it. I'll do the spell. Here it comes, she heard him say. Tawa looked up and raised one of her hands in preparation. A flying object went flying from behind her. She had cast a spell that would dramatically increase its mass before she saw what it was. It was Waffles, their next-door neighbor's cat. Dumplin was going to get an earful from Cupcake, that's for sure. Waffles had only a moment to yell in surprise before he flew inside the boundary of the circle. The tendrils of lightning lunged at him like a waiting panther. Tawa watched the cat's body being broken down by the lightning while at the same time growing larger. Inevitably, the deconstructing energy won out. The last of Waffles' skeleton winked out of existence. The swirling vortex ceased fighting against Tawa, but started glowing brighter and brighter. Is that bad? Dumplin asked. I have no idea, she said honestly. This reaction conflicted with all of the calculations she had made. Further words were halted when the vortex suddenly exploded, throwing out a shockwave that sent furniture and science equipment tumbling to the ground and knocking down Tawa and Dumplin. The light shined at a blinding intensity, a sound like shearing metal rising to a fever pitch until it was gone. In 1 second, the light vanished and everything became silent. Tawa blinked the spots from her eyes, too dizzy to climb to her feet. Tawa, she dimly heard Dumplin ask over the ringing in her ears. Babe, you okay? I'm fine, she said as her vision started to clear. She saw the multicolored blob in front of her and reached out. He took her hand and gently pulled her to her feet. It seems I may have miscalculated. Maybe a little, Dumplin said with a smirk. He turned his head to look at the empty rune circle. So, no homo nucleus. Homunculus, she repeated. I suppose not. I'll need to check over my notes again too. The words died out as she looked at the center of the circle. There was a small blob of gray substance sitting there that had not been there before. Dumplin noticed it at the same time and started inching toward it. She edged forward to stand by his side. What is that? Dumplin asked. Must be some sort of byproduct of the reaction, Tawa answered. Probably best to get rid of it. I'll get a container. She walked over to one of her cabinets and grabbed a metal bucket. She turned back to the center of the room just as Dumplin was reaching out to touch the blob. Dumplin, I really think you shouldn't. Dumplin poked the blob. The blob jumped in surprise and scuttled away. Tawa blinked rapidly, certain that she must have seen it wrong. But no, the blob was moving. And now it was looking at them. The blob was roughly spherical in shape. On the bottom it had 4 stubby little legs that were less than 2 inches long. Wide electric blue eyes blinked at them in confusion. It looked back and forth between them before tilting its head in curiosity. Naya. It meowed from its little mouth. Tawa said. It's so cute. Dumplin practically squealed. He reached for it, making it yelp in fright before scrambling under a shelf. I don't think it's going to come out, dear, Tawa said, putting the bucket down. Let me grab my notebooks and I can decontaminate the laboratory. That will get rid of it. No, Dumplin said. She stared at him in confusion. Just wait. He dropped to his knees in front of the shelf. She took a knee as well to get a better look. The byproduct was pressing itself against the wall, shivering with fright and breathing hard. Hey there, Dumplin said in a soothing tone of voice. It's all right, little one. Nobody's gonna hurt you. He slowly reached forward, offering his open palm to the creature. It tried to back away again, so he stopped. He just held his arm like that for a few long moments. Slowly, the creature began to shuffle closer, still looking cautious. Dumplin just stayed as he was, displaying a level of patience that Tawa had never seen in him before. Finally, the creature was close enough to sniff Dumplin's hand. It was close enough to grab, but for some reason Dumplin was still waiting. It gave a few more sniffs before gently nuzzling against his palm. Tawa saw Dumplin smile as he stroked the creature's head. It closed its eyes in pleasure and started purring. As gently as if he were carrying a newborn, Dumplin carefully pulled the creature out from under the shelf, all the time stroking its head. Let's see if we can find you some food, he said as he carried the creature up the stairs and out of the laboratory, leaving Tawa to watch in bewilderment. Let's see, Dumplin said as he dug into the couple's fridge. We have strawberries, bananas, cookies, burritos, purple stuff, soda, and some candy. Let's try the berries. He took some of the red fruit in hand and placing it down in front of the creature, who was standing on the kitchen counter. It sniffed the berries, seemed to find them to its liking, and opened its mouth wide, revealing an array of tiny, needle-sharp teeth. With a single bite, it gobbled up the entire handful. Naya, it said happily when it finished chewing. Dumplin smiled and stroked its head. The creature purred in contentment and nuzzled against him. Dear, please don't feed the failed experiment, Tawa said, looking up from the 4 journals she had arranged on the table. She was looking back and forth between them, scribbling out complex equations on a piece of scratch paper. The little one is hungry, Dumplin said, reaching back into the fridge. This time, he came out holding a burrito wrapped in aluminum foil. Before he could unfold it, however, the creature leapt forward and scarfed it right out of his hand. It chewed for a few moments before spitting out a wadded ball of aluminum foil and then swallowing the meal. Naya, it said happily. Dumplin laughed. She seems pretty smart. Tawa's pencil froze in mid-stroke. Yeah, she's a girl. I can tell. It's an accidental byproduct, Dumplin. There is no point getting attached to it. She shook her head in exasperation before going back to her calculations. After a few moments, she froze again, staring down at her paper. With a loud groan, her face dropped to slam down on the table surface. You okay? Dumplin asked, used to his wife's theatrics. I forgot to carry the 2, she said into the table. I was trying to make artificial life. Instead, I ended up making actual life. She glanced up at him. It was made from both of us. If you think about it, that means that she, corrected Dumplin. Fine, that she is actually our child. A moment passed in silence as this information seeped into them. Dumplin started to smile. I always wanted to be a dad, now that I think of it. So, kid, he said as he turned, want to stay with us? The creature wasn't there anymore. Before they could start searching, they heard a small adorable burp. The creature was lounging in a spotlessly clean bowl that had just seconds ago held a chocolate pudding that was meant for the Time Patrol potluck tomorrow. Dumplin smiled at the adorable display, not caring that he would have to make another one. I guess we know your favorite food now, he said. The creature just gave a sleepy meow as Dumplin took her into his arms. You're gonna need a name, he said quietly. He thought for a few moments before looking at the clean bowl. He smiled. How about Puddin'? He asked the creature. Naya, the small creature said quietly before falling asleep in his arms. It took a great deal of finesse to explain to Cronoa how Puddin' had come into existence overnight, but Dumplin somehow managed to do it in a way that wouldn't make the childish god want to throw energy blasts at him or worse, make dinner for him. Maybe it was also helped by the sheer amount of property damage that the Kais made the very next day. That probably helped divert some of the attention. With an unusually large increase in the amount of time rifts across history, the Time Patrol had begun to hire more and more new recruits. The new members were coming in so fast that Elder Kai was called in to help with the training of the recruits. This spawned many arguments between the two Kais about how the Time Patrol should be run, some of these arguments almost coming to blows thanks to Kronoa's immaturity and Elder Kai's penchant for stupidity. Seeing them go at each other at the drop of a hat got many of the new recruits talking. First it was about why the argument was happening in the first place, then about who would win said argument, then about who would win an actual fight, then about how strong either of them really were, and then finally about why people believed these two layabout deities were so strong in the first place. They only had others say so that these two could even actually do anything. Kronoa decided to put a stop to such dangerous thinking by arranging for a grand demonstration of both hers and Elder Kai's divine powers. After gathering the entire Time Patrol together, Kronoa made a huge display of bringing the Shenron statue in the meditation garden to life. Unfortunately, she put a little too much effort into it and the now immense statue ran amok, smashing Toki Toki City to pieces around it. The childlike Kai spent the entire ordeal locked in the time nest, projecting a force field to keep it all in one piece as the dragon raged outside. Dumplin and Tawa watched the disaster in fascinated silence as Puddin sat upon her father's head, giggling non-stop at the explosions all around her. When the dust settled, Toki Toki City was in shambles. The dragon had flown off and had taken up a position obscuring the entire northern horizon. After giving a very embarrassed apology to a very ticked-off Time Patrol, Kronoa and Elder Kai began organizing the effort of remaking the Time Patrol headquarters. Plans were made and the ruins of Toki Toki City were used as the foundation for a brand new city. Dumplin and Tawa even helped steal hunks of land from Earth, Namek, and a bunch of other planets across the ages to fit onto the new city-like building blocks. Soon, the new Content City was complete. All throughout the building process, Puddin would ride around on her father's head while he worked, giving her a first-hand view of the world around her. Dumplin would proudly introduce her as his daughter to any Time Patroller who would listen. Puddin was soaking up experience and knowledge like a sponge. By the end of the first day she was speaking a handful of words. By the second she was managing simple sentences. By the fourth she was actually holding conversations with other people and was starting to puzzle out written words. Dumplin was as proud as he could possibly be, but Tawa was still keeping her distance for some reason, spending most of her days in her lab. This led to lots of times when Dumplin and Puddin would spend the evening together after a long day of work, either reading books, watching TV, or just snuggling on the couch. One morning, Puddin surprised her parents by waking them up after completely changing her form. When everyone had gone to bed the previous night, she had been the little blob with legs. When they woke up, she had grown immensely and had changed her body to the proportions of a 5-year-old girl. She even grew some head tentacles to give herself bangs and a ponytail. It took a bit of practice to shift from using 4 legs to just 2, but within minutes she was walking like a champ. She even went with her father to the morning muster of the Time Patrol. Puddin looked all around the courtyard in front of the time nest with wide eyes, trying to take in everything around her. Dozens of Time Patrollers stood at attention as Trunks, her daddy's partner, was giving the announcements for the morning. There were so many patrollers here, from every size, shape, and species. Some were so tall that they seemed to stretch up forever while some were even shorter than her daddy. The demon in question just smiled at his excited daughter, but kept a firm grip on her hand to make sure she didn't go running off to who knows where. Puddin's other hand was clenching and unclenching around the fabric of her lime green sundress. All right, you all have your orders, Trunks said, his posture straight with his hands clasped behind his back. You're all dismissed, sir. The assembled patrollers said at once before going off to their duties. Trunks let out a sigh before approaching the two. Morning, Dumplin', he said before turning to Puddin' with a look of confusion. Who's this? Ah, she pouted. Don't you remember me, Trunky? Her eyes grew impossibly large as she looked sorrowfully up at him. Trunks' jaw dropped. Puddin', how? What, how? I decided I wanted to be bigger. Naya, she said with a proud smile. It must have been a weird day because Trunks decided to accept that answer. Is there any chance of Tawa being around today? Trunks asked hesitantly. Dumplin' shook his head. The missus is working on her next big thing. She'll only come out when she's hungry. Or horny. Or both. He shrugged. Again, Trunks' jaw dropped as he looked back and forth between Dumplin' and his daughter. The girl just looked at her father in confusion. I didn't know mommy had horns, she said, her head to the side. Dumplin' smiled and patted her head. Only when she's really mad, sweetheart. Oh, I get it, she said with a smile. Oh my gods, Trunks groaned, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Anyway, he emphasized, eager to move the conversation along, I need to talk to you. In private, please. Oh, sure, Dumplin' said. He craned his neck and looked around the courtyard. A few time patrollers were seeing to various tasks close by while some actually had time to loiter here. He looked at each of them in turn, giving consideration to who could keep an eye on Puddin' for a few minutes. There were some he wouldn't trust to take care of a ham sandwich, some he wouldn't even think to leave Puddin' with, and some he would only leave Puddin' alone with so he could put the aftermath on YouTube. Finally, he spotted a time patroller across the courtyard who he felt was halfway capable of looking after her for a few minutes. Hey, Pata, Dumplin' shouted across the courtyard, his free hand cupped around his mouth. Get you and your butt over here. The patroller in question was a black-haired Saiyan who looked in his late 20s and dressed in a blue gi over a yellow muscle shirt. He was currently going through a sword kata before he froze and turned to face Dumplin'. His golden eyes shined with excitement as he sheathed his katana and sped forward to them. He snapped to attention and bowed to Dumplin'. You called, sir? He asked excitedly. Dumplin' nodded before indicating Puddin'. I got to talk with Trunks for a bit. Can you keep an eye on Puddin' while I'm gone? Puddin', Pata said, looking at the girl in amazement before smiling. Wow, you really grew. She said proudly. Puddin', this is Pata, Dumplin' told her. He's a good patroller cadet and a pretty decent guy. He's gonna look out for you while I'm gone. All right. You got it, Daddy, she said with a smile. Dumplin' smiled back. Now be good for Pata, he said as he kissed her left cheek, and bad for me, as he kissed her other cheek. Be back soon. With that, he waved goodbye before both he and Trunks took to the air and flew toward the time nest. For a moment, Puddin' and Pata just stood there staring at each other. A random wind blew a tumbleweed past. So, they both said at the same time. They stopped and continued to stare at each other a moment before starting to laugh. You first, Pata urged. What were you doing when my daddy called you? She asked. Pata smiled and patted his sword hilt. I was practicing a sword style I'm trying to make. I'm calling it Dragon Claw right now, but I might change the name later. You're actually making a style. Puddin' said in awe. That is so cool. I can't wait till I start learning how to fight. You want to be a patroller? You bet. She squeaked. Hearing Daddy tell me about his stories, about how he fights the bad guys and he's all, bam. Boom. Swish. Pow. Hia. Naya. It's so cool. I really wanna do that. Pata laughed as she showed him her kung fu moves, which basically equated to her swinging her arms around and saying, Watcha. A lot. You've definitely got the heart for it, Puddin', he said. An idea struck him and he smiled conspiratorially. Say, Puddin', he began, what would you say to doing a little bit of training while we wait for your dad? With a blur of motion, she was suddenly grabbing onto his GI with both hands and looking up at him with an eager expression. Pada could swear he saw stars in her eyes. Naya, she said in barely over a whisper. The sheer adorableness made Pada laugh. All right then, he said. Let's do some training. Yes, she cried, hopping up and down like a jackrabbit on caffeine. What are we doing first? Orin combo. Kamehameha. The 55 fists of furious fury. Pada put his hand on her shoulder, keeping her in place. Let's start with performing a correct punch, he said. That works too. After spending a few minutes getting Puddin into a proper boxing stance, Pada started coaching step by step in how to a proper punch. Puddin was a little surprised by how much work went into just doing the simplest of strikes, but she was nevertheless making progress. Her initial attempts didn't have much force behind them, but she and Pada kept going through the motions over and over again. Soon, she had the entire movement down. When she finally pulled off a punch with all of her strength behind it, the force was incredible. The pressure wave alone was enough to knock Pada back a step. Wow, he said when he got his balance back. That's one heck of an arm you got there. We should definitely show your dad when he gets back. Naya, Puddin said proudly, as her fist flew toward Pada. He started to block before he realized she was just holding her fist out to give him a fist bump, which he gladly returned. They laughed for a few moments before Puddin went quiet and started fiddling with her dress. She started before going quiet. What's wrong, Puddin? He asked. I was just wondering. Well, she flushed in embarrassment. Would you like to be my friend, Pada? The man smiled and held his hand out to her. I'd be happy to, he said with a smile. She returned it and shook his hand. Great, she said. We can do sleepovers, braid each other's hair, talk about boys, run around outside, play dress up, and watch cartoons all day. Naya. Depends, he said with a smile. What cartoons do you like? Well, she started looking bashful again. I know it's kind of silly and it's a pretty old show, but I really like this one called Warrior Pegasus Princess. I just can't stop watching the adventures of Princess Moonbeam. She was now attempting to hide behind her bangs. When Puddin finally looked back at Pada, she was surprised to find he was no longer smiling but was looking at her with an almost stunned expression. Then, a small smile spread across his face. He stood up to his full height and drew his sword with a sharp ring of steel. Behold, he said dramatically as he thrust his blade into the sky, for the story of our resolve is written in our battle cries. Puddin's mouth dropped open. She knew this. Pada glanced at her from the corner of his eye and winked at her. She could feel her mouth turning into an immense grin. Those that stand against us, she picked up, lack something that is always by our side. The joys of life. The joys that come from the will and capacity for friendship. For love. And with those joys, we shall show you no mercy. Taste the wrath of love. They both shouted, striking dramatic poses. A few moments of silence passed before they heard a scattered round of applause. The other time patrollers in the courtyard laughed and clapped for them, but Puddin was barely listening. We should get together and do a marathon sometime, she said happily, bouncing up and down in excitement. Just give me the time and place, Pada answered with a smile, sheathing his sword. Before Puddin could really get into a discussion on her absolute favorite show, she heard a voice calling her name. She spun around with a smile. Daddy, she said, bounding over to give her father a flying tackle hug. Dumplin plucked her out of the air and spun her around. Trunks was standing next to him and hopped to the side to avoid Puddin's flailing feet. Miss me, sweetie? He asked. Yes, she said, but Pada and I had a really great time. Can he come over to our house sometime? Please, 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 please. I take it things went well. Dumplin said, glancing at Pada. The Saiyan smiled and bowed. We got along very well together, he said. It turns out we share a few interests. We also did a little training today. I showed her how to do a punch. Suddenly, Pata's smile turned slightly evil. Mr. Trunks, sir. Yes, Pata, Trunks answered. Could you hold this for Puddin'? Pata asked, pulling out a large padded punch shield. I need to see how her whole posture is when she punches. Trunks said, pointing at the large piece of training equipment. Where did you get that? I carry exercise equipment everywhere, Pata said with a shrug. Again, Trunks decided to accept that explanation. Without another word, he took the shield and embraced himself to receive Puddin's punch, but he didn't seem too concerned. All right, Puddin, Pata said, just like we practiced. Hit it as hard as you can. She nodded and took her position in front of Trunks. She took her stance, took a few breaths, and brought her fist back before snapping it forward. Smack. Ah! Trunks screamed as he was sent flying into the air, over the ledge, and across the skyline of Conton City into the business district. Based on the angle, it looked like he landed somewhere close to the school. There were a few moments of silence in the courtyard. BWA ha 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 ha. Dumplin roared with laughter. That never gets old. In moments, every nearby time patroller was laughing, barely able to stay standing. Hee hee hee, Puddin giggled. Oops. Pata and Dumplin both gave her a thumbs up, making her giggle even harder. Things were good in Conton City. Puddin pressed herself deeper into the shadows of her family's dining room, hands clamped over her mouth. Her heart pounded in her ears. She knew that if she uttered the tiniest squeak, she would be found. A floorboard in the family room squeaked. Puddin tried to stifle her cry of fright. Footsteps came into the room. The dark figure looked from side to side, scanning the room. You know you can't hide, the figure said. Just let this happen. Puddin curled up even more, desperate to make herself as small as possible. If he saw her, she was done for. She now deeply regretted choosing bright green for her training GI. The footsteps, slow and methodical, stalked past the corner she crouched trembling in. They were heading into the kitchen, but the hunter would be back in moments. Puddin took her chance and ran. She sprang from her corner and sprinted through the living room. The slapping of her bare feet on the wood floors was practically silent compared to the pounding of her heart. She managed to hear the stomping footsteps behind her, which only spurred her to greater speed. She made it to the other side of the room and reached for the door handle, but her hand never made it. She found herself blocked by some invisible barrier. She couldn't get to the door. She barely had a moment to realize her situation before hands seized her in an iron grip. Figured I'd take some precautions to make sure you didn't leave, her captor said. Now come on. I'm getting impatient. No, no, Puddin cried, trying to wriggle and free herself from his grip. Unfortunately, the assailant was much stronger than her. He half dragged and half carried her down the hall, with her fighting him every step of the way. As they got closer and closer to the door at the end of the hall, she found herself relieved of her GI. Her undergarments soon followed. He shouldered open the door at the end of the hall to come into a bright room. She struggled and kicked, but she could not stop him. He raised her up and flung her down into. Splash. Puddin sat up in the bathtub and rubbed furiously at her face, hissing and spitting. Soap in my eye, she cried. Soap in my eye. It's your own damn fault, grumbled Dumplin as he took a seat next to the tub and began scrubbing furiously at her filthy head tendrils. It's what you get for deciding to play in the dirt with Pata. He was teaching me grappling. She protested. Whatever, Dumplin said dismissively. I hate the water, Puddin yelled. Adjust. When Dumplin took his hands off of her to rub soap between his palms, Puddin tried to jump out of the tub and make a break for it. Dumplin was too fast for her, however, and held her in place as he shampooed her tendrils. Don't try it, Puddin, he said, wringing out a sponge over her head to wash the suds off. I am so not in the mood today. Your mother. He stopped his ministrations and sighed. Never mind. Puddin didn't need anything more than that. The sadness washed over her again as she sat there and let her daddy wash her. It had been her first day of training, and her mother hadn't come to see her. After Puddin's display of strength against Trunks, Dumplin was as proud as he could possibly be, and Trunks now had a reputation among the time patrollers as the guy who got knocked out by a 5-week-old girl. Fortunately for Trunks, it didn't catch on. Dumplin signed Puddin up to get formal training at the Time Patroller Academy, and she started lessons 1 week later. She was the youngest there, in both physical and actual age, but her sheer strength stunned the instructors. She was so excited that they needed to put 30-pound weights on all of her limbs just to keep her still. She had started the day by accidentally crushing one of the workout machines when she tried to use it, and everything went downhill from there. A Majin instructor named Punosa took a fast liking to Puddin's upbeat personality and endless energy. She started teaching Puddin the basics of the Majin fighting style, taking advantage of her inherent strength and elastic limbs. Puddin was still working on getting her arms to stretch when Punosa called an end of the day. The training session ended both because it was nearing sundown and because Puddin had single-handedly destroyed over a dozen punching bags over the course of the day. A few of the other instructors seemed a little fearful of Puddin taking regular lessons. Despite the fact that she beginning her training to become a time patroller and that she got to spend some time training with Pata, Puddin was feeling sad on the way home. She had eagerly told her mother that she would be training today and kept pestering her until Tawa finally caved and told her she would come and watch. Puddin had spent the whole day eagerly looking over toward where her dad was sitting at the side of the dojo, each time hoping with all of her heart that she would find her mother sitting there with him. She never came. When Puddin and Dumplin finally made it home, the sight of a note from Tawa telling them she had gone out to find some new samples for her research had put Dumplin and Puddin in a very unhappy mood. Even a delicious dinner of macaroni and cheese wasn't enough to lift their spirits. Later that night, after Puddin's bath, Tawa eventually came home and promptly disappeared into her lab without saying a single word to either of them. Puddin had knocked on the basement door for almost 5 minutes in order to get her mother's attentions before just giving up and going to bed. She lay on her bed and held her stuffed animals close, trying not to cry as she slowly fell asleep. Time Patrol Training Dojo, the next day. I'm sorry, Dumplin, but the other instructors have expressed, shall we say, concerns about Puddin continuing to train at this present moment, Punosa said, looking apologetically at Dumplin and Puddin. They think her strength is too much of a loose cannon. I voted to continue the lessons, but they overruled me. Until your daughter can gain a greater degree of control over her strength, she cannot continue her lessons here. She looked down at the heartbroken Puddin, tears in the corner of her own eyes. Punosa knelt down and wrapped her arms around the girl. I am so sorry, Puddin, but I can't do anything about it. Puddin returned the hug as her own tears trailed down her face. The ensuing silence was broken by the sound of an explosion from within the training hall. Please no, screamed a male voice. I'm a pacifist. You're a pussy. Another voice roared before there were sounds of more explosions. Yes, Dumplin drawled, clearly things will be much safer if Puddin does not attend. I'm sure there are no other reasons that Puddin was denied, right? Punosa looked at the ground, unable to meet his gaze. I am not privy to the motives of the other instructors, she said. I fought for you too, sir, and I would happily fight for you again, but this is out of my hands. Dumplin sighed and rubbed his forehead. It's all right. I know this wasn't your fault, he said. He squared his shoulders and gave her a determined look. Just tell those instructors of yours that she'll be back tomorrow and they better be ready to train her. Come on, sweetheart. We've got work to do. Puddin nodded and dejectedly trudged after him, sniffling and wiping away her tears. As they passed the main courtyard of Canton City, she looked over at the larger-than-life holographic display of Dumplin. The monument had always inspired her, encouraging her to become a time patroller to live up to her daddy's legacy. Now, though, it seemed there were some who would rather deny her the chance. They're not gonna let me train tomorrow, Daddy, she sniffled, looking at her father. You heard what Ponessa said. The other masters don't like me. It's not that they don't like you, Puddin', Dumplin said, pulling her close to his side and giving her a hug. It's that they're scared of me, and therefore of you. But we'll show them. When you show up tomorrow, you won't break a single thing by accident. How am I gonna do that? Something your mom has, he said vaguely. They had reached the front door of their cottage and entered through the front door. Tawa was, wonder of wonders, in the family room, sipping a cup of tea while reading a book. Dumplin let out a long breath through his teeth before turning back to Puddin'. Sweetheart, go to your room and pack up all of your clothes. Might as well pack your stuffed animals too. I need some time to talk to your mother. Okay, Daddy, Puddin' said, going off to do what she was told. Dumplin turned back to Tawa. She shot him a glance before returning to her book. I take it since you both are here that the training sessions aren't going well, she said. Not like you would know. Puddin' was crushed that you didn't come yesterday. I was carrying out very important research. I didn't have the time to come see her sloppily punching a bag. Very important. My ass. This is our daughter, Tawa. Dumplin paused and let out another breath, willing himself to stay calm. Look, I need to help Puddin' control her strength. It's gonna take a lot of work, so we need to use that door you made. Well, go ahead, she said dismissively. You know where it is. You're coming with us, Dumplin said in a tone that brooked no argument. Tawa did not seem to get that impression as her eyes snapped back up to meet his. Why would I want to do that? She asked. Because your daughter has no idea who her mother really is, said Dumplin. Because if you miss out on this much time with her, you're going to regret it. He sighed and rubbed the back of his head. And because you'll be much more efficient in your work if you come with us. That last statement sounded almost reluctant. Tawa stared at him for a few long moments. Please, said Dumplin. I'm actually begging you to come. After a pause, Tawa sighed. Fine, she said, standing up. I have a few experiments that could use a little extra time. Just let me pack up and we'll leave at noon. Oh, and make sure to tell Cupcake to grab our paper tomorrow. Tawa walked down the hall to grab her things while Dumplin stood in the living room. Please let this work, he whispered to himself. Please, please let this work. Ever since the day she was born, Puddin' had never been in the family basement. It had always been considered Mom's place, and no others were welcome. Regardless, she found herself and her entire family standing in the basement with enough luggage to signify a long vacation. Her father had told her they were taking a training trip, but that still left many questions unanswered. The three of them stood in front of a dark brown wooden door set into the wall. The frame around it was absolutely covered with hundreds upon hundreds of runes and markings. Puddin' looked from the door to her parents and then back again. What's this thing? She asked, unconsciously squeezing the plush dragon her father had given her a few weeks ago. One of my older projects, Tawa said, looking down at her. Your father kept pestering me to help find him a better way to train, and I eventually came up with this. We've both used it once in the past and he wants to go again to help you control your power. How does it work? Puddin' asked. It's just a door. It's easier to just show you, Dumplin said, moving towards it. He opened the door and ushered his family in. Puddin' gasped, rubbed her eyes, and gasped again. White. White as far as she could see. An endless void extended outward far into the distance. She and her family were standing in the main room of some kind of house with a completely open wall leading to an open stone patio. She looked around in silent awe as Tawa moved to deposit her bags on the counter of a small kitchen while Dumplin shut the door behind him. This is in our basement. Puddin finally managed to say. It's huge. Her expression of absolute shock made Dumplin laugh. Not exactly, sweetheart, he said. It's kind of like a pocket world. The door leads to this world, no matter where it is placed. Also, time moves differently while in here. 1 year spent inside is equal to only 1 day outside. Wow, Puddin said, looking out at the endless white ground and sky. Is there anything out there? No, said Tawa, coming over to stand by her. There's only this house in the void. Void, void, void. Puddin stared outward. Does it always do that? She asked. Just when you say, void, said Dumplin. Void, void, void. Spooky, said Puddin. Yeah, kinda, agreed Dumplin. Alright, so this is a pretty comfortable place to live for a year. Bathroom and showers are through that door, and up those stairs are a few bedrooms. They're all the same, so you can pick out where you want to sleep. First, though, drop your stuff and take off your weights. Okay, Puddin said, placing her bags on the ground and taking off her training weights. Each of them made a loud thud when they hit the tiled ground. Alright, now come with me, Dumplin said, leading her outside. Puddin shrugged and followed him. The instant she stepped out onto the patio, Puddin was almost driven to her knees. She felt like someone had strapped a car to her back. Planting her feet, she managed to stand up straight. After the surprise had worn off, she could stand upright, but it was much harder than it should be. What's going on? She asked. As soon as you walk outside, the gravity increases to 10 times the amount you're used to. The further you are from the house, the higher the gravity will become. He reached out and put a hand on her shoulder. I just want you to know that we are going to be doing some serious training for the next year. I'll get you started on fighting and we'll build up your strength, but most of all you need to learn to control your strength. Alright, Naya, I can't wait, Puddin said excitedly. Good, said Dumplin. Now go pick out a room and unpack. When you're done, come out here and we'll get started with some warm-up laps. You got it, Daddy, Puddin exclaimed, saluting him before running inside. Are you sure she's ready for this yet? Tawa asked, walking outside to stand beside him. Of course she is, Dumplin said. He grinned at Tawa. She's our kid after all. Tawa nodded, but said nothing. A few minutes later, Puddin practically jumped down the stairs and ran outside, stumbling slightly as she exited the house. She straightened up and stood before her daddy, practically vibrating with excitement. Dumplin smiled proudly at her. We've got a lot of work to do, he said. Let's get started. Months passed in the hyperbolic time chamber, as Tawa called it, and Puddin had excelled in her training by leaps and bounds. Under the tutelage of her father, she was mastering the basics of the Majin fighting style and could use her stretchy arms to punch someone from over 5 meters away. She had started her training feeling squeezed by the ×10 gravity outside the door, but now she could sprint in a ×15 gravity zone for almost a quarter of an hour before she had stop and rest. She had also learned how to fly and how to throw energy blasts. Granted, the only stable energy blast she could currently make was about the size of a tennis ball, but progress was still progress. Thankfully, Puddin had grown during those months. After eating enough food from the constantly refilling pantry, Puddin was shocked to wake up one day and find that she had grown exponentially overnight. She was now the size of an older teenager, and she was also surprised that she now had. The new form she gained wasn't quite comfortable to fight in initially, but she soon adjusted to her new proportions. She had at first been mortified when none of her clothes would fit her anymore, but her parents helped her out with that. At the start, her mother made Puddin an outfit that looked exactly like her own, but it just made Dumplin uncomfortable. After a quick discussion, Puddin agreed and asked her daddy to make her some new outfits with his clothes beam. Her normal attire now consisted of bright yellow pants with a pink and green belt, neon green boots with pink trim, pink armbands, a dark red chest wrap, a neon green vest with the Time Patrol insignia on it, and a bright pink scarf tied around her neck. The outfit showed off Puddin's midriff, which she was perfectly fine with. She liked to show off the arrangement of steam holes that formed a heart on her stomach. To Puddin, it was the perfect outfit for training in. The training she was going through was extensive and varied indeed. For the moment, however, Puddin was focused on a very unorthodox training exercise. Here it comes, Dumplin said, tossing a ball into the air. 100 yards away from him, Puddin crouched low to the ground like a sprinter waiting for the gun. Her eyes followed the baseball up into the air until it reached its peak before coming down. Her muscles clenched like a coiled spring. She was ready. The ball descended to her father's chest level. That was when he swung the bat he was holding. The sound it made was less of a crack and more of an explosion, and that wasn't even counting the sonic boom that came as the baseball immediately accelerated past the speed of sound. Puddin took to the air the instant her father's bat and the ball made contact. Faster than the normal eye could see, she sped through the air to intercept the ball. Just as it was about to pass her, her hand snapped forward and the ball flew into her mitt with a satisfying thunk. Nice catch, sweetheart, Dumplin called. Naya, Puddin said happily before tossing the ball back to him. Ever since her daddy had first introduced her to the stickball sport, Puddin had adored it. The Time Patrol actually held a baseball championship every year, but the last one was before she was born. She was looking forward to playing in the coming championship. For a few months now, Dumplin had found many ways to turn baseball practice into a form of training for her. Here comes another, Dumplin called before hitting the ball again. Puddin did not move from her position, but instead stretched her mid-arm as quick as a snake to catch the ball. Great one, Dumplin called with a laugh. Puddin smiled and tossed the ball back to her father. After a tough morning of high-gravity sprints and hand-to-hand practice, it was nice to unwind with a bit of fun. However, when Puddin looked past her father back to the house, her mood dropped. Next to the patio, her mother had set up a sort of makeshift lab. A bunch of tables were arranged in a rough circle and were covered with test tubes, Bunsen burners, and oddles of other sciencey things, along with perhaps a half-dozen in-progress experiments. Tawa was there now, mixing some liquids and powders to make some sort of new rune paint. The demon woman had set up that lab on the second day in the time chamber and had gotten into the habit of spending most of her waking hours there. Different environment, same old mom, Puddin thought sadly. Dumplin followed her gaze before she saw his eyes narrow. 1 second, he said, dropping the bat. Before Puddin could say a word, he was stomping off in the direction of Tawa's makeshift lab. Despite herself, Puddin found herself flying closer to watch and listen. Dumplin squeezed between two tables and stood behind Tawa with his hands planted on his hips. Tawa was dividing her attentions between a mixture and an open journal she was scribbling notes in. I don't understand why you are bothering me, dear, Tawa said without turning, gently swirling the mixture in a flask. I have work that I'm trying to do. You always have work to do, Tawa, Dumplin said. Why don't you take a break? Play some baseball with us. It's fun. Tawa glanced over her shoulder at him before turning back to her mixture. She's your daughter too, you know, said Dumplin. Tawa stilled at hearing that. Following her father's example, Puddin landed next to him in Tawa's area. Please, Mom, Puddin begged. Baseball's so much fun, you'll see. We just want to spend some quality time with you. Please don't avoid us. Void, void, void. Tawa glanced at Puddin. That was her undoing. She snapped her eyes back to the mixture in her hands, but it was too late. She had witnessed the most powerful weapon in Puddin's arsenal. The Puddin pout. Her eyes had become huge and glistening. Her lower lip trembled, as if on the verge of tears. Most beings could not resist its power. Tawa desperately wanted to believe she was not most beings. This is very important, she said, but her resolve was weakening. I need to make sure it reaches the right thickness. Please. Puddin whined. Please, 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 please. Tawa broke. Okay. All right, she snapped, placing the flask on the table with a little more force than necessary. If it will keep the two of you quiet for 5 minutes, then fine. Naya, Puddin cheered, jumping over Tawa's lab table to stride proudly back to where Dumplin had left his bat. The demon god himself followed at a more sedate pace, keeping alongside Tawa, who just sighed and moved forward like she were going to her execution. It's not that bad, honey, Dumplin said, patting her arm. It's just a little bit of family fun. We'll play a few games and then you can get back to your science. Very well, Tawa said as they reached their Puddin, who was bouncing up and down in excitement. So babe, Dumplin said, picking up the bat, how you wanna play this? As soon as he finished, Tawa snatched the bat out of his hands. I think I'll be at bat first. You two better ready yourselves. She grinned evilly at the determined Puddin. I won't be as nice as your father was. Bring it, Puddin said with a big smile. And like that, it seemed the family was beginning to tighten their bonds. When Puddin and Dumplin were playing baseball, throwing water balloons, or doing some other fun activity as a means of training, they would pester Tawa until she agreed to join them. As the months passed and the time of their exit grew closer, Tawa required less and less convincing every time they asked. She even smiled as they played together. One day, as he was doing some training of his own, Dumplin spied Tawa giving Puddin a lesson on the timeline and multiverse theory. Tawa was obviously enjoying having a student and Puddin was listening to her with rapt attention. Dumplin turned away and smiled. It had worked. His family was whole again. Conton City. Pata sat against the wall of the Time Patrol training hall, mindlessly scraping a whetstone down the edge of his sword. It was a mindless task meant to distract himself as he waited and also a means to keep his Saiyan urges in check. Punosa had told him yesterday about how the instructors had denied Puddin the chance to train, and he had immediately marched over to their cottage to volunteer as her tutor, even if he was still a cadet. When he arrived, however, the house was completely lifeless. Their neighbor, a pink Majin named Cupcake, could only tell him that they had left on a day trip, but she had no idea where they had gone. In fact, nobody had an idea where they had gone. Even Trunks didn't have a clue as to his partner's whereabouts. After hours of fruitless searching, he gave up and decided to wait until Dumplin and Puddin arrived. So there he was, sharpening his sword and trying very hard not to glare at the other instructors, who were clustered in a group and whispering to each other. Doubtless they were trying to think up some way to keep Puddin from being trained, and therefore from becoming a time patroller. Despite his reputation as the hero who kept Toki Toki City from being destroyed, Dumplin had many detractors within the ranks of the Time Patrol. Apparently, some people didn't feel comfortable with a warrior who had absorbed a demon god that even Kronoa could not vanquish. They were likewise very uncomfortable with the thought of what his daughter might do if given the chance. Blind fools. Pata took a few calming breaths and sheathed his sword. He respected Dumplin. He was a powerful and skilled warrior, one Pata would be happy to fight alongside. He was also a man who loved and cherished his family. That was all Pata needed to know. Bong! Went a nearby clock. Pata glanced at it before turning his gaze back to the entryway. Punosa was leaning against the wall next to him, also watching the entrance to the training hall. She was just as eager to see Puddin return as he was. You think they'll be here? He asked her. She gave a snort of laughter. I've known Dumplin for longer than you, kid, she said. If he said they'll be here, they'll be here. The instant she said that, she suddenly straightened in surprise. Speak of the demon, she said. Pata spun to face the door to the training hall, but it didn't open. When he strained his ears, however, he he could hear a quiet conversation on the other side of the door. Okay. He heard Dumplin say, "This is the song you wanted, right?" Yup. That's the one. That sounded so much like Puddin', but something seemed off about it. I still don't understand why we're doing this, drawled a more mature voice. Pata blinked in shock. That was Tawa. Tawa hardly ever left the house unless she was collecting samples for her experiments. I have to make the perfect entrance, Mom. All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. The doors suddenly flew open just as song started playing. Don't you dare stare, you better move. Don't ever compare me to the rest, that'll all get sliced and diced. Competition's payin' the price. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. I'm gonna knock you out. Mama said knock you out. Pata had to blink a few times to make sure he was seeing things correctly. Dumplin was standing in the entryway, there was no mistaking him, and he was holding a boom box over his head. Next to him was Tawa, still dressed in her curve-hugging bodysuit and leaning on her staff. She also wore a backpack. Standing in front of them was a teenage gray Majin girl. She was dressed in a midriff-bearing outfit with the most neon color imaginable. She had Puddin's tendril style, Puddin's bright blue eyes, Puddin's cat-like mouth, Puddin'. That's Puddin', his mind finally deduced. That's actually Puddin'. She stood confidently in the entranceway, hands on her hips and smiling at the group of now silent instructors. Pata was blinking rapidly, struggling to match up the young woman before him with the little girl he had seen mere days ago. Puddin's eyes turned to him and her face split into a huge, happy, completely Puddin-like smile. Pata! She cried happily, seeming to teleport to his side. Before Pata could even voice his surprise, she had snatched him up in a bone-crushing hug, swinging him from side to side. Oh my gosh, it's been so long and I missed you, cause it's been a whole year, but I'm so much stronger now so we can have awesome spars, and I really want to watch more cartoons with you cause it's been so long and just Naya, I missed you. Puddin', gasped Pata. Ribs. Crushing the ribs. Oops, she said before gently setting him down. As he rubbed his likely bruised torso, Puddin' was still practically bouncing in place. Sorry Pata. It's just been so long since I've seen you. It's been like 2 days, he said in confusion. Maybe for you, she said with a smile. For me it's felt like a year. Okay then, said Pata, now hopelessly confused. Puddin' just gave him another, more gentle hug and turned to Punosa. Hey Punosa, she said with a wave. Hope you're ready to train. You and I have a lot of catching up to do. Looking forward to it, Puddin', she said with a smile. We're still here, said another voice. Stop ignoring us. Everyone turned to look at the group of instructors, who were staring at Puddin' with disbelief. One of the teachers, a Namekian named Karimiga, stepped forward. We want to know what is going on here, he said, but first, what happened to you? You've grown exponentially, and not just in size. What happened? Daddy and I trained for a whole year yesterday, Puddin' said with a smile. The other instructors all blinked in unison. Anyway, Karimiga said slowly, if you want to train here, you'll need to prove you can control your strength. Can you do this? You bet I do, Puddin' said with a grin. I'm gonna knock your socks off. If you say so, Karimiga said as he crossed his arms. He did not look like he believed her, but Puddin' just smiled and turned to her family. Mom, the plates. Tawa smiled before pulling the backpack off of her shoulders. She reached in and grabbed something before tossing it to Puddin', almost faster than Pata could see. Regardless, Puddin' caught it easily, and he saw it was a blue and white china bowl. Within seconds, Tawa was tossing more and more china pieces at her daughter and Puddin' began to juggle the various plates and bowls. She would toss them up before deftly plucking them out of the air and passing them back and forth between her hands, sometimes behind her back as well. Pata just stood there blinking. The Puddin he had seen a few days ago would not have been capable of something like this. Karimiga said, looking uncomfortable, where exactly did you find that china? Oh, your place, Puddin said offhandedly as she continued to juggle. The Namekian suddenly looked like as if he were trying to pass an entire marble bag of kidney stones. Pada had to work hard to stifle his laughter. Puddin's routine ended with her flinging the plates and bowls into the air in such a way that they came down to form a perfect stack in the palm of her hand. She took a moment to admire her work before offering it to Karimiga with a smile. Impressed? She asked. Karimiga just silently took the china from her, his stunned expression mirroring those of the other instructors. The silence was broken by the sound of a slow clap. Very well done, Puddin, a female voice said. Everyone turned to face the new arrival, and the sight of who it was made Pada and all of the instructors snap to attention. Supreme Kai of Time, they all said at once, bowing in respect. Karimiga just barely managed to keep the china from spilling out of his hands. Sup, Chronoa, Dumplin said with a half nod, drawing a few glares from the instructors. Chronoa just shook her head and gave him a look. Hello Dumplin. I suppose that there's no real point in asking if Puddin's spontaneous growth spurt is at all connected to where you've been the last 24 hours. You could say that, Dumplin answered with a smile. And where have you been? Are you sure you want to know the answer? Chronoa shot him a small glare. I don't usually ask questions I don't want to know the answers to. This is one of those questions, Dumplin said. Trust me on this. After a few moments of glaring at Dumplin, Chronoa seemed to decide that she wouldn't get anything out of him. She turned to Puddin and smiled. Good to see you back, Puddin, she said with a smile. I was on my way over to sort out this little disagreement, but I see you have everything well in hand. She sent a powerful look at the instructors, who were each looking a shade paler. Punosa couldn't stop grinning. I think we're all reasonably impressed with Puddin's abilities, correct? Yes, they all said. And there is no problem with her continuing her training to join the Time Patrol, correct? Correct, they all said, looking like Christmas and Halloween had just been cancelled. Pada smirked. In that case, Chronoa said with a smile, I see no problems here. Puddin will be given a spot in the training roster and she'll start her academy lessons when the winter holiday is over. Naya, cheered Puddin, hopping with joy. Dumplin was smiling proudly while Tawa's smile, though smaller, was still present. Punosa looked absolutely smug as the other instructors slunk off in dejected silence. That is, until they all heard the sound of breaking china, swiftly followed by Karimiga's cry of anguish. So, Punosa said, ready to get started. I need to test you again to figure out where you stand. In a little bit, Puddin said. First, Pada's taking me to get ice cream. I am, he asked. You are, she said. Okay, he said with a grin. They said their farewells to the others and went on their way. So, Pada began, how did you really get as big as you are now? To be honest, I'm kinda missing the cute little goo girl who was running around the city a few days ago. Puddin smiled. Well, as a girl gets older, she'll start to see some dramatic changes in her body. These can include. Stop. Never mind. I get it, Pada said, waving his arms as if to brush away her words. Puddin laughed. Pada found himself laughing too. It was good to have her home. Puddin shifted her grip on her weapon, waiting for the perfect moment. She adjusted her footing slightly and tilted the club a few degrees up. Her entire body was like a coiled spring. Her fingers twitched anxiously, ready to move at the slightest provocation. Her feet shifted slightly, scuffing across the dirt. With a high-pitched whine, her target suddenly streaked toward her. With a blur of motion, Puddin struck, swinging her weapon faster than the eye could see. A series of tiny sonic booms followed her club as it slashed through the air. It connected with Puddin's target with a loud, piercing crack, and her target was sent flying. It streaked through the sky and blasted a hole through an innocent cloud that had just been minding its own business. Puddin smiled and looked at Punosa for approval. The older Majin, wearing a jersey, cap, and whistle today, grinned and nodded in approval. I think we just found our star hitter, she said. Other patrollers at the tryout nodded in stunned agreement. Nice work, Puddin. Naya. Puddin cheered, bouncing up and down happily. I won't let you down, coach. I'm sure you won't, Puddin, Punosa said with a smile. All right, then, Sherbet. Front and center. Let's see how you handle a bat. Puddin took her seat on the bench as a nervous-looking frost demon took her place at home plate. Puddin happily hummed to herself, satisfied with her performance. When they were talking over ice cream, she had told Pata about her discovery of baseball and how much fun it was to play with her dad. He quickly told her about the Time Patrol Baseball League, which he had taken part in last year and was going to have tryouts in the next few days. He was on a mostly Saiyan team called the Raging Ravagers, led by Academy instructor Samo. Seized by the excitement of being on a baseball team, Puddin decided to try out for Punosa's team, the Super Scrappers, partly because she really wanted to have Punosa as her coach and partly because the Scrappers' uniforms, by sheer luck, were lime green. Puddin looked out over the field the Time Patrol used to Super Baseball. It was one of two fields they had, with the two of them floating on opposite ends of Conton City. Unlike normal baseball diamonds, these were designed with super powerful Time Patrollers in mind, so the bases were over 100 yards apart and every other area of the diamond was appropriately scaled up. This was a field that the players could really cut loose on, instead of constraining themselves to the normal-sized baseball diamond. The tryouts continued for a few more hours and Punosa was able to fill up her roster. Puddin spent the time either daydreaming or chatting with Cupcake, her friend and next-door neighbor. Cupcake had been friends with Dumplin since they moved into their house and she had formed a friendship with Puddin shortly after she started training. The friendly pink Majin was likely to be the team shortstop, partly thanks to her stretchy arms that could move just slightly faster than Puddin's. So, there I was on the palace wall, Cupcake told her, practically vibrating from laughter at a joke yet to be told. Her black and red eyes were twinkling with mirth. Kid Goku's standing on my right with his bow staff and Bulma's standing on my left wearing a suit of power armor. We've also got Yamcha, Tien, and the Royal Guard all at the ready. King Piccolo and the Red Ribbon Army have completely surrounded the palace. He's got a demon destruction wave aimed right at the wall. We are about 2 seconds from having our defenses breached and the palace flooded with demons and fascists. Then, guess what happens? He starts talking to nobody like all bad guys do. Puddin asked with a smile. Exactly, Cupcake said. Sweet Kais, Puddin, it's unbelievable how much time these bad guys just spend talking about killing the good guys instead of actually doing it. Both of them giggled before Cupcake continued. He starts going on about how, now that he has absorbed Kami, he's ready to destroy our cities and name himself Lord of the Planet. The people I'm with have nowhere to go and he just won't shut up. Cupcake rolled her eyes. Anyway, so Demon King Piccolo, at this, Puddin just rolled her eyes. There is only one true demon lord, she said. Yeah, I know. It's your dear old dad, long may he reign and all that stuff, but let me finish. So Piccolo is prepping his wave and mouthing off, so I decide to take the initiative. I speed down into the throng of soldiers and start smashing tanks left and right before he could even finish saying, prepare to die. When he turns to look at me, Goku nails him right in the head with that stick. Piccolo had the stupidest look on his face. The two of them dissolved into giggles, prompting Punosa to give them a look. Look ladies, I know that Piflam's hitting isn't exactly professional grade, but there's no need to be giggling about it. The teenage Namekian at bat turned a deeper shade of green as she said that. We were talking about something else, coach, said Cupcake. Sorry to interrupt you, Pifflam. You're doing good. Cupcake shot him a wink and a smile. If at all possible, the Namekian seemed to turn even greener. I'll tell you more later, Cupcake whispered. Puddin nodded and sat back to watch the rest of the tryouts. When everything was said and done, Punosa called them all to stand in a circle around her. All right, everyone, said Punosa, the roster will be as follows. Puddin phased out for a little while until she heard names she cared about. Cupcake is shortstop and is third at bat. Puddin will be in the outfield and fifth at bat. We want to build up some people on bases before she knocks one out of the park. Punosa tucked her clipboard away and put a hand on her hip. That's all for today, folks. Be here at 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow for practice. Scrappers, dismissed. Yes, coach. They all said at once before they dispersed. Puddin and Cupcake walked home together, giving Cupcake the time to finish her story, including how she forcibly ripped Kami out of King Piccolo before Goku delivered the final blow. When they reached their houses, they split ways. After waving goodbye, Puddin unlocked her front door and stepped inside. She stepped inside, dismissively tossing her keys onto the table beside the door. She heard voices in the living room and creeped forward to get a better look. The sight that awaited her froze her in her tracks. Details eventually began to filter into her utterly fried mind. First, Tawa was out of her lab. Second, she was sitting down on the couch with Dumplin. Third, she was reclining back on the couch while Dumplin delicately lowered a chocolate-covered strawberry toward her mouth. Tawa had a sultry smile on her face as she bit into the strawberry, letting out a moan of appreciation that was probably less about the snack and more about something different. Tawa delicately chewed on the fruit before looking into Dumplin's face. That's when something incredible happened. It happened for only a second, but Puddin was sure she had seen it. The next instant, Tawa noticed Puddin standing in the hallway, and her face shifted back to a neutral mask. Dumplin followed her gaze and he smiled happily at Puddin. Sweetheart. Welcome home. How were the tryouts? Pretty good, Puddin managed to answer, mentally stumbling for a moment. I made the team. Wahoo. Her father cheered, making Puddin smile. Congratulations, sweetheart. Thanks, Daddy. Anyway, I'm playing outfield and Punosa is already saying I might be the star hitter. We'll just have to see how I do in practice. Nice work, Puddin. Dumplin got up from the couch and gave her a tight hug. I'm so proud of you. How about I order some pizza tonight? What do you want? Oh, one meat lovers, one with extra cheese, and one with French fries and Oreos. Got it, he said, moving toward the phone. What do you want, babe? Dumplin and Puddin both turned toward Tawa, who just looked at them without an expression. After a long moment, she stood up with a stretch. I should go back to my experiments. Leave out a pepperoni, Dumplin. I'll eat it when I'm done. With that, she left the room and entered the basement, closing the door behind her. Dumplin just sighed sadly before dialing the number. Not really knowing what to say, Puddin instead gave her dad a sympathetic pat on the shoulder before heading to her room to change into more comfortable clothes. As she was making her way back into the living room, she found herself moving toward the bookshelf against the wall. She knew she had seen something in Tawa's face, but she had to be sure. She floated to the top shelf, where the photo albums were kept and started running her finger over the titles. There was awesome explosions, trunks ups, best kills, cute puppies. Aha, Puddin said to herself, pulling out the album labeled Our Family. She sat down on the couch and opened the book, flipping through the laminated pages. She needed to be sure she had seen what she thought she had seen. She skipped over pictures of the old Toki Toki city gardens decorated for the wedding, the pictures of the food layouts and floral arrangements, and pictures of all the deities who had come to celebrate. Finally, she reached the picture she was looking for and stared long and hard at it. She remembered from when Dumplin had first showed it to her. It was presumably just after Dumplin and Tawa had said their "Idos" and kissed, as they were making their way down the aisle while many confused time patrollers were applauding them. Dumplin was wearing a Technicolor tuxedo while Tawa wore a black wedding dress that was much slinkier than a wedding dress probably had a right to be. Though they were making their way down the aisle, they still had their eyes locked on one another. Puddin was mostly focusing her attention on Tawa's face. The demon scientist was sporting a wide, genuine, overjoyed smile as she looked into Dumplin's eyes. There was no hint of the evil genius she had been when she and Dumplin had first met. This was the smile of someone who was truly happy at the idea of spending their life with someone they loved. It was the smile that Puddin had seen when she had walked in on Tawa and Dumplin together. Puddin flipped further into the book, past the pictures of the couple relaxing on picnics and doing sciencey things together down in the labs, and a handful of times when Tawa went on a mission with Dumplin. They looked so happy together. I don't understand, Puddin whispered to herself. What changed, guys? When she got to pictures that included herself, the change became apparent. Whenever Puddin was in a picture, Dumplin would have the biggest smile on his face while Tawa just had a blank mask, if she was even in the pictures at all. She was only in a handful of pictures when Puddin was still a blob, and she had practically disappeared once Puddin became humanoid. There were still smiles from Tawa, but only in pictures without Puddin in them, like when she and Dumplin went out on date night. Outside of pictures, Puddin had never seen Tawa give a smile like that one she had today. As Puddin flipped back to the wedding photo and looked at her parents' happy faces, she felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Her parents hardly ever acted like that anymore. Even after the trip in the time chamber, it was only a matter of days before Tawa was back in the habit of spending her days locked in her laboratory. Over her entire existence, Puddin could still use her fingers and toes to count the number of times Tawa had willingly taken time so the three of them could be together. An idea came to her and she felt a pain in her chest. Puddin felt tears in the corners of her eyes. Is it me? Did I ruin everything? Want to watch a movie, Puddin? Dumplin asked from the kitchen. Cue something up on Space Netflix and we can have a little dinner party. Puddin hurriedly pawed at her eyes and replaced the photo album. Alright, Dad, she said, trying to keep her voice from trembling. How about something with mindless explosions? The bigger the better, he said. Look for something made from Bikal May. Got it, Puddin said as she turned on the TV and looked through the options. She eventually settled on one of the more brainless Transmorphers movies and tried to enjoy herself, but the thoughts from earlier still pressed down on her. She just silently sat on the couch and hugged her knees to her chest. Did I ruin everything? 2 weeks after tryouts, it was the night before the first game of the season. While Puddin was feeling confident in her abilities as a baseball player, she was still nervous about tomorrow. Therefore, she found herself pacing back and forth in the living room, running her fingers through her hair tendrils and drumming a constant beat against her skull. After her 12th lap back and forth across the room, Dumplin looked up from his tablet and the game he was playing. Puddin, could you please sit down? You're making me nervous. I can't help it, Daddy, she almost whined. She was almost hyperventilating at this point. The first game is tomorrow. If I mess up, I'm gonna let the whole team down. And if I let the team down, I'm gonna let Punosa down. And if I let Punosa down. Puddin, breathe. Puddin stopped and took a few breaths. Thanks, Daddy, she said. Sorry. You don't need to apologize to me, sweetheart, he said soothingly. He set his tablet aside and patted the couch seat next to him. Puddin plopped herself down and leaned against him. It's all right, Puddin. You may not have faith in your skills right now, but we do. If you can't believe in yourself for that, then at least believe in us who believe in you. Okay. Puddin took another calming breath and nodded. That's my girl, he said, giving her a hug. Want me to make you some honey tea? Please, Puddin said with a nod. Dumplin got up and went into the kitchen. Puddin made herself more comfortable in the couch and found herself looking across the room where her mother sat. Tawa had been sitting in one of the armchairs for almost an hour, scribbling page after page in one of her many journals and completely ignoring both of them. Puddin averted her eyes and stared at the carpet. Even after these many weeks, it was hard to look at her mom, or really either of her parents, and not think again about whether they'd both be happier together if she weren't there. Before she could descend any further into the morose pit of depression she found herself in, Dumplin returned with a hot mug of tea. Puddin took it in hand and sipped from the delicious brew. Her father really did have a talent for making tea. Feel better? He asked. Puddin nodded, making him smile. Well then, he said with a clap of his hands, what do you want to do tonight? Watch a movie, read a book, play some video games. Video games sounds good, Puddin said with a smile. We can do Silver Eye, but no more Oddjob. But he's the best. And you're just upset I beat you that one time, Dumplin mock complained. Because he's shorter than the crosshairs. Anyone who plays Oddjob is a cheater. Alright, I won't play Oddjob, Dumplin said with a smile. He got up from the couch to move to the TV as Puddin took a sip from her mug. Before he could turn on the game system, however, his communicator beeped from where it was charging on the counter. Letting out a hiss through his teeth that sounded like a muffled curse word, Dumplin walked to the communicator and answered it. What? He snapped. He waited for a few moments before his expression went slack. You're joking. Now, my daughter's game is tomorrow, for S sake. He waited some more. Seriously, no one is available to take this. After a long pause, he sighed and rubbed his face. Fine. I'll come. Just don't expect me to be happy about it. Tell Trunks to have a senzu bean ready for me when I get there. He disconnected the call and gave a heavy sigh. You have to go on a mission, don't you? Said Puddin. Dumplin nodded. Frieza and his forces found out how to grow the Tree of Might, so now I need to go fight a goddamn war while Trunks just s around and claims to be helping. He sighed again. I should be back in about 3 days. Puddin felt her heart sink, and Dumplin could probably tell, based on his expression. I am so sorry, sweetheart. I'll be back as soon as I can, but I can't make the game. Puddin nodded and forced a smile on her face. It's okay, Daddy. There will be other games. It's fine. Go save the world. Dumplin gave her a sorrowful look before giving a reluctant nod. He stepped forward and gave her a tight, loving hug. I love you, sweetheart, he said quietly. I'll be back as soon as I can. I know, she said. I love you too, Daddy. When their hug ended, Dumplin walked over where Tawa was sitting and gently rubbed her shoulder, snapping her back to reality. I've got to go on a mission, babe. Should be back in a couple of days. Alright, Tawa said, giving him a kiss. Take care of yourself and make sure you have some fun. That actually made Dumplin snort out a laugh. Fat chance, he said. These baby villains hardly ever give me a chance to have fun and cut loose. He shook his head and sighed. Then he leaned closer to Tawa and whispered into her ear. It was quiet, but Puddin could still make it out. Babe, do you think you could go see Puddin's game tomorrow? I know it would mean a lot to her. Tawa tapped her pencil against the page of the journal a few times. If I'm not too busy, she said. Dumplin nodded after a pause. All right, I love you, he said. Love you too, dear, said Tawa. Love you, Daddy, said Puddin. With a final wave, Dumplin walked out the door. Immediately, Tawa was engrossed in her journal and the house once again became silent. Feeling like her heart was made of lead, Puddin stood and went to her room. She would need her rest for tomorrow. As she lay on her bed and held her plush dragon close, she willed herself not to cry. It's okay, she whispered to herself. There will be more games. Dad can go see those ones. Besides, Mom said she's coming tomorrow. She'll see my game, and then we'll get to spend time together. Things will be good. They'll be fine. If you believe that, said a little voice in the back of her head, then you deserve the disappointment coming to you. Puddin squeezed the dragon tighter and tried to get some sleep. By the time it was finally Puddin's turn to be at bat, she was itching for the chance to channel some annoyance from what had been a very crappy day so far. It had started bad and stayed that way. She had been awake for most of the night due to nerves. She found out the milk was spoiled only after she had filled her cereal bowl, and of course her dear mother was nowhere to be found. She had spent 10 minutes knocking on the door to get her mother's attention and had waited at the house for her as long as she was able to before she had to rush off to meet her team. When she was finally at the field, she had to deal with a surprisingly large number of hecklers and opposing fans. Since baseball was the only sport that the Time Patrol had an official league for, team bias apparently ran strong, especially in the winter. As she and her teammates were warming up, they all had to deal with seemingly endless insults from the opposing team, the frenzied Falcons. The worst of them was the Earthling pitcher, who spent half of his time shouting insults and the other half demanding from the girls on the Super Scrappers, with his buddies laughing and egging him on the whole time. All of this served only to make the smoldering pit of anger in Puddin's gut burn even hotter as time went on. Not to mention the fact that her mother still hadn't come. Puddin had been looking over the crowd every few minutes since she had arrived. The stands were filling fast, but she could not find her mother. She had tried energy sensing, like Punosa had taught her, but couldn't pick up her mother's energy signature. She hadn't come. And then there was the crowd itself. What felt like hundreds of people were in the stands of the baseball field, watching the game with rapt attention. More specifically, they were currently watching her, and Puddin could feel the oppressive weight of their gaze on her shoulders. It made a part of her want to run away and find a hole to hide in. However, one person who she was glad to see was Pata. He and the rest of the Ravagers were playing on the field after this, so he was sitting in the stands and cheering her on for the duration of her own game. Seeing him there made Puddin think twice about blowing something up as a way to relieve the tension. Just barely, though. At the moment, Cupcake and a Saiyan named Basil were on first and second base. As Puddin took her position at home plate, she glared at the pitcher and shifted her grip of the bat slightly. So far, this human was pretty detestable in every way. He was tossing the ball up and down in the air and giving Puddin the kind of smile that should result in immediate imprisonment. He had a round face, green eyes, and an orange bandana tied around his head. "Hey sugar tits," he drawled, making shivers climb up Puddin's spine. "How about you throw this game and I'll take you out on a date? I promise I can be quite the gentleman." "I wouldn't touch that if I were you, man," the first baseman said. "That's the demon chick. She'd probably just try to eat you alive." Puddin could feel the wood of the bat groaning in protest as her grip tightened. "Hey, that's not a deal breaker," the pitcher said. "The wild ones are always my favorite." "Shut your whore mouth." Puddin heard Pata yell from the stands. "Just stick to wooing Sabaman." The prompted a few laughs from the crowd and a death glare from the pitcher. "You're gonna pay for that one, Pata," he shouted. The weird back and forth between Pata and the pitcher made Puddin lose her focus for a moment and relax her stance. That was her mistake. Before she could get herself ready again, the ball whizzed right past her head and slammed into the catcher's mitt. "Strike one," the umpire shouted. The Falcons supporters all cheered while the pitcher just grinned at her. "Want me to throw the next one a little slower, Toots?" he asked mockingly. Puddin growled and took a few practice swings. "Just throw the goddamn ball," she snarled to herself. The pitcher wound up for another pitch and sent the ball flying. This time, Puddin's bat connected, but she swung too early. The ball went into the stands, but it also went flying over the foul line. "Foul ball," the umpire shouted, accompanied by shouts of disappointment from the spectators and a few jeers from the Falcons. The pitcher, however, was dead silent and just gave her a blazing death glare. Must be mad that I managed to hit it that far, Puddin thought to herself as she tapped her bat against home plate. You won't get so lucky next time, demon, he said. Luck's got nothing to do with it, Puddin said back, getting back into a ready position. The two stared at each other for a long moment, almost as if the rest of the field had disappeared. He was looking for weakness and Puddin was lying in wait, ready to strike. Finally, the pitcher hurled the ball. It sped toward her, leaving a blazing trail of ki behind it. Puddin grit her teeth and swung, pumping all of her anger and frustration into her swing. Her bat collided with the ball, but she found herself struggling to overcome the force of the pitch. The ball continued its spin, grinding into the wood of the bat, but unable to push past it. Puddin didn't even need to see the shit-eating grin on the pitcher's face to know it was there. Puddin could feel all of the frustration that had been building up in her starting to boil over. First her dad needs to go on a mission, then her mother locked herself in the basement again, then there was this pitcher who had been acting like an asshole the whole game. She was done. She was completely, utterly, done. RRRRRRRRRRAAAAHH. She roared, putting her full power into the struggle. Finally, the stalemate ended. With an ear-splitting crack, the ball was sent flying into the air as Puddin's bat snapped in two. The outfielders made to fly after the ball, but it disappeared out of the field to the north before they could make it more than a yard. Puddin could even see a mock cone forming around the ball as it blew holes in every cloud that was in its path. As it sliced through a large cumulus cloud, Puddin felt her stomach drop. Oh crap, it's heading right for the... Even from this distance, Puddin could hear the smack as it collided with the giant dragon. Ow, motherer! The immense creature roared, holding one of its eyes. Why is it always the goddamn eye? The dragon turned a baleful gaze toward the baseball field. Watch your shooting those things. Christ. The entire audience was dead silent. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Puddin could feel the stares of the other players and the people in the audience, and she felt a cold shiver go through her body. She pulled the brim of her helmet down, trying to hide her darkening face. I'll just do my home run, she said quietly, beginning her flight around the bases. The other flyers on the bases hesitated for a few long moments, unknowingly letting her pass them before they snapped back to reality and completed their own flights back to home plate. Puddin completed her loop of the bases and took a seat on the bench with her hat pulled over her eyes. She tried very hard not to meet the gaze of any of her teammates or spectators. No sooner had she sat down when a pair of very familiar ninja sandals came into view. That was pretty incredible, Puddin, said Punosa. Since the ground was not polite enough to split open and swallow Puddin right then and there, she timidly raised her eyes to look at her coach. In her peripheral vision, she could see her teammates scooting downward to give them some privacy. I'm sorry, Puddin muttered. Punosa blinked. The hell are you apologizing for? She said. I was coming to ask if you can do that a few more times in this game. Really? Puddin said in surprise. Punosa smiled and put a comforting hand on her shoulder. Kiddo, your strength is unbelievable. That was the most amazing hit I've seen in all my years in this baseball league. You are a being of incredible power, so it's time to own it. But everyone was staring at me, Puddin said, looking back down at the ground. It was like I'd done something wrong. Punosa looked like she was about to say something before she stopped. Ah, I get it, she said. She took a seat next to Puddin and put an arm around her shoulder. You've never been in front of this many people before, have you? Puddin shook her head. Thought so. You're still pretty young and you haven't regularly interacted with many people outside of your parents, Pata, Cupcake, and me. I guess so, Puddin said. Punosa smiled. I understand why you felt like you might have done something wrong, given how everyone was staring at you. However, What you've done is absolutely amazing. It's an incredible gift, so you shouldn't feel like you need to hide from it, okay? Puddin thought for a moment before she nodded. Punos's smile widened. Plus, I really want to use that swing of yours to stomp these losers into the ground. Puddin laughed and nodded in agreement. You good to go? Ready and willing, coach. That's my girl. Punosa gave Puddin a squeeze on her shoulder before standing up. Looks like we're switching up. Ready to go out and win this thing. Puddin smiled and grabbed her mitt. You bet. And so the innings passed in a similar manner. When the Scrappers were at bat, Puddin would hit home runs almost every time. When on the field, she bounced and flew all around to try and catch every ball that came her way. The most satisfying parts of the entire game would be when she would catch flying at the last moment before they would become home runs. One time in the third inning, she caught the ball hit by the pitcher. His face turned the funniest shade of beet red as she smiled and waved at him. In the end, the Super Scrappers won the game 15-4, a fantastic start as Punosa told them. As Pata went off to warm up with his own team, Puddin made her way home, promising to get changed and be back to watch his game. As she was leaving, however, she suddenly found her path blocked. The Falcons' pitcher stood in her path with two of his teammates standing a short way off. His eyes spoke of nothing less than the wish to destroy the object of their attention. In this case, it was Puddin. Something I can help you with? Puddin asked politely. Dumplin always told her to start out polite when addressing possible opponents. It confused them and put them off balance. You might have won the game, but I'm not done with you yet, he snarled. You ruined my home run, bitch. You have to answer for that. I guess I did do that, Puddin said with a noncommittal shrug. What of it? Fight me. Right now. Puddin just blinked and put her hands on her hips. You saw what I did on my first home run, right? He looked surprised by the question, but nodded. Good. Then you need to ask yourself a very specific question. If she can do that to a ball, what is she likely to do to me? Think about that before you do anything. The pitcher suddenly looked much less confident and took a few steps back. That's what I thought. With that, Puddin brushed past him. She had made it 10 paces away before he suddenly reclaimed his courage. This isn't over, he shouted. My name is Daly and I declare you my vile nemesis. Mark my words, I will defeat you. Whatever, Puddin said, rolling her eyes. After a few minutes of walking, Puddin entered her house and went straight to the bathroom to take a shower. After scrubbing herself down, she put on a fuzzy set of clothes and moved to leave again, hoping she had some time before Pata's game to buy some peanuts, which she had heard were traditional baseball food. When she reached the living room, however, she was shocked to find that she wasn't alone. Tawa was sitting in the armchair she took whenever she was upstairs in the living room, reading a paperback book with a floral patterned cover in one hand and sipping from a cup of tea with her other. She appeared the very image of refinement and relaxation, and it was really starting to freak Puddin out. Mom, she said. You're here. Tawa finally looked up, almost as if she hadn't noticed Puddin, but Puddin knew better. I finished a long experiment early this morning. Since the new batch of cells needs time to grow, I figured I might take the day to relax after a long string of experiments. Puddin felt like the floor had been pulled out from under her, like she was in freefall but still standing still. A weight dropped into her stomach and she felt chills travel from her toes all the way up to the rest of her body. She could hear the sound of her heart thudding in her ears. Did you remember that my first baseball game was today? She asked through gritted teeth. I do remember you and your father making some noise about that, Tawa said, returning her gaze down to her book. Puddin's hands curled into fists. It was pretty cool, she said in a tight voice. It would have been real nice if you could have come and seen me. I doubt that, Tawa said, taking a sip of tea. I find competitive sports to be positively wearisome. But, Puddin was having a hard time putting her words together correctly. But it was important to me, Mom. Tawa glanced up again to meet Puddin's eyes. Puddin, Tawa said slowly, as if she were lecturing a 3-year-old, I don't see how any of that is my concern. Puddin felt something break. Why do you have to be like this? She snapped, causing Tawa to start in surprise. Every single time I talk to you, every single time you even see me, you act like you just saw the most grotesque thing in the world and immediately get as far away as you can from me. I thought things were better after the time chamber, but then you just go back to the way you've always been. Young lady, Tawa said slowly, closing her book with almost predatory grace. No, said Puddin, feeling tears in the corners of her eyes. None of that stuff. I want to know why you hate me. Tawa just stared at her silently. I mean, said Puddin, feeling her heart pound a mile a minute, I've seen the pictures. You and Dad were so happy before, and now you've changed. I mean, I don't see how this can happen. I'm your daughter and. You're wrong, Puddin, Tawa said, interrupting her. I don't hate you. Puddin just stood frozen, not quite able to believe what she had just heard. What? The room was eerily silent. Slowly, Tawa placed her teacup on the saucer and put down her book before calmly standing up. I do not hate you, Puddin, but I do not consider myself your mother. She brushed a tuft of hair over her pointed ear before affixing a blank expression on her face. Puddin scarcely dared to breathe. On the night you were created, Tawa continued, I made a mistake. One single, tiny mistake. Because of that, I found myself landed with you and my husband suddenly just expects me to happily play parent with him. I had no interest in being a mother in any way, so you can imagine I'm not terribly thrilled when the man I love simply expects me to care about you. She stepped closer, staring at Puddin with cold eyes. So no, Puddin, I did not change. Your father was the one who changed. But, said Puddin, before she swallowed to moisten her dry throat. But I don't understand. What about when we were in the time chamber? We were a family together. She sniffled. You looked like you were happy. We were happy. Tawa averted her eyes and stepped past her. You would do well not to read too much into that, Puddin. Nothing good can come of it. With that, she made her way down the hall and turned into the bathroom before closing the door. Shortly after, the sound of the faucet could be heard filling up the bathtub. Puddin just stood in the center of the living room, frozen in place as tears slowly trickled down her cheeks. Biting her lip to stifle her sobs, she started making her way toward the door, pressing her palms into her eyes to stop the tears. She blindly grabbed her jacket from the coat rack before stumbling out the door and down the path heading toward the city. She needed to find Pata. Pata was leaving the baseball field after a very close victory. The first few innings, the Ravagers and their opponents, the Cavaliers, had been almost neck and neck. In the very last inning, his team had managed to squeezing in a 3-point home run and thereby secure the win. Pata was glad for the win, but a bit confused as well. He knew that Puddin had gone home after her game with the promise to be back soon, but he hadn't seen her at the game, or even felt her presence. What could have happened to her? He thought to himself. As if summoned by his thoughts, he turned around only to come face to face with her. A happy greeting was halfway out of his mouth before he froze. Puddin had her arms wrapped tight across her chest, her hands holding fistfuls of the coat fabric, and there were tears dripping down her face. Puddin, he said quietly, are you okay? What happened? Puddin looked around them at the people still hanging around the field before staring down at the ground. Can we talk somewhere? Yeah, Pata said with a hesitant nod. I know a good place. Follow me. My God, Puddin, I'm so sorry that she said that to you. I just don't know what to do, Pata, Puddin said in a broken-hearted tone, staring down at the bustle of the city below her. She brushed away a few lingering tears from her cheeks. She had just finished relating to him all of the problems she and Dumplin had been having with Tawa's unwillingness to fix any of them, and finally the talk she had just had with Tawa. The two friends were both sitting on the roof of one of the office buildings in downtown Conton City. From next to her, Pada sighed and rubbed her shoulder in an attempt to comfort her. I don't know, Puddin, he said. Tawa is, by nature, a difficult woman to deal with. Maybe your dad or Trunks knows what do. Trunks? Are you kidding? Puddin didn't roll her eyes so much as toss them upward. He locks up if a girl so much as talks to him. How the hell is he gonna help solve this? She sniffled. And besides, if Daddy knew what to do about this, he would have already done it. He's more of the blow up planets type instead of the building bridges type. Maybe you can ask Punosa. Or Kronoa, Pada suggested. They've probably got some good ideas for what to do. I guess it can't hurt, Puddin said, pushing herself off of the rooftop to float in the air. Come on. We can ask Punosa first. Pada nodded before he took to the air himself, and the two of them drifted down to the ground. Their silence was broken by the sounds of laughter and jeering. There was a group of male cadets sitting in the outside area of a restaurant, calling out encouragements to Pada and making loud wolf whistles. Pada just laughed and flipped them off as he and Puddin turned a corner and lost sight of them. Who were they? Puddin asked. Just some of my friends at the academy, he said. They're firmly under the impression that we're dating. Not the brightest lights in the city. Is the thought of dating me really that terrible? Puddin asked with a grin. Well, Pada started. That's not what I meant. It's just hard to think of you that way. I still remember when you were that little gray blob girl I was watching cartoons with. You're like the little sister I always wanted. Dating you would just be weird. Is that bad to say? Puddin laughed. Don't worry, Pada. It's not weird. We're good friends. Plus, she shrugged, you're not really my type. Alright. Good to hear, he said. So, how should we approach Punosa about all this Tawa business? When he didn't receive an answer, he looked over and saw that Puddin was no longer next to him. Instead, she was standing in front of a shop window with her face plastered against the glass. The window was filled with Christmas trees and decorations and little Santa figurines. Huh, he said. I totally forgot it was almost Christmas. Puddin turned to him, looking confused. Pada, what's Christmas? It's a holiday in December. It's only a few days away now, he answered. It's a time where people come together, exchange gifts, and eat delicious food. There's also a big focus on family togetherness and peace through the cosmos and goodwill towards sentience and all that jazz. Family togetherness? She asked, her eyes practically sparkling. Pada nodded before she turned her wide eyes back to the window display. That's it, she said. Huh. Suddenly, Puddin grabbed Pada by the shoulders and started shaking him vigorously. That's it, Pada, she yelled. This is exactly what I need. Naya. Thank you, Pada. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She seized him in a tight hug before dropping him on the sidewalk and soaring into the air. I need to find out everything about Christmas. In moments she was gone, leaving a very confused and shaken Pada. Glad I could help, he said to the empty air. He had realized a long time ago that it took a certain amount of both inner strength and mental acrobatics to keep pace with Puddin. One of these days, he really needed to introduce her to some new people. It was becoming really hard keeping track of her all by himself. With a shrug, he began making his way back home.